So I've taken the following materials out. I've grabbed the colored construction paper from my art packet, as well as a pair of scissors, a pencil, and a glue stick, or any kind of glue or tape could work for this as well. We are going to be learning how to paint with scissors, a technique that was invented by a famous French artist named Matisse. And he invented this by cutting out shapes and making a composition, almost like putting together a puzzle from ideas that inspired him. He was very much inspired by nature. He would create cutouts inspired by gardens and oceans, and since it's getting really warm out, I have been inspired by the ocean. It's making me want to jump into the ocean, so I think that I'm going to be making mine based around the ocean. When I think of oceans, I think of coral reefs, so I'm going to start to make some shapes. And Henri Matisse, he made very organic shapes. So we know geometric shapes like a triangle or a circle, things that are a square, but we're going to be using shapes that are a bit more free-flowing, kind of like the ocean. So I'm going to start by making just a shape here with some lines actually first, and then I'm going to draw an organic shape around the lines that I make, coming around some curvy edges, and just looking for something free-flowing. And I'm going to go ahead and cut my shape out. This is a great way to practice cutting during this exercise. Matisse cut a lot, and the trick is to hold your cutting hand still and use your other hand to kind of rotate around the edges, because there's lots of curves that are going to be made with your shapes. And if you're really careful in cutting out your shapes, you can actually use the cut scraps to incorporate in your collage as well, which is super fun to do. You can maybe use those to spark other ideas for your scene. So I'm going to show you how to cut this one piece. There you have it, coming around the edges here. You see I'm keeping my cutting hand super still. And there we go, I have a shape here. Looks like a coral reef. And if we look at the piece I just cut, if I flip it around, it's also a really interesting shape that I could maybe cut and incorporate in my piece as well in some way. So it's up to you. You can make any sort of shape that you'd like, any sort of organic shape, and come up with any theme you'd like. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with my theme of underwater. So I've cut out some water with some organic waves coming through. I cut some pieces and noticed that they reminded me of algae. I also cut some pieces here, and I'm gonna just kind of play around with what we call composition. And composition is where things are located on a piece to make it interesting and also what we call balanced. So I'm going to play around with this and see what I come up with. All right, and this is the scene I've come up with. As I was cutting out pieces, I found that there was the shape of a swimmer. So I actually included that into the ocean scene, as well as a fish jumping in the water, playing around with different shapes of waves and splashes, played around with some different shaped algae and coral reef. And I can't wait to see what you all come up with your Matisse-inspired collages.